If you're a replayer, you can still participate. You can tap on the screen for hearts. You can follow me or find me. Hi, hi, Monica. You can share this broadcast with anybody that you think would need it. And you can, of course, you can, big mess. And you can find me on Twitter or Snapchat if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer any of your personal finance questions and guide you, good morning, and guide you on your way to just get in a better position when it comes to finances. So, hi, go, Fefe, go. So if you're new to me, my name is Joannazarach. I talk about money habits every single day of the week, 7 days a week at 10 a.m. Central Time. And I'm trying to get people on a better path. Hi, Miss Mac. On a better path when it comes to their finances. And I advocate for a few things that if you recognize, there'll be some themes in it, and I'll get to what I'll be talking about today. So the themes that I talk about, hi, Anthony, good to see you on here. Here are some themes that I talk about. One is to really get a handle on your money. And then today, so 2016, there really is so many tools available to you to make it easier, right? It's, if you're kind of taking advice for people who were doing it 20, 30 years ago, there is a lot of sort of manual labor when it comes to finding out where you are financially. But today, in today's world, there's a lot of tools. So first of all, I always tell people to use the tools that are available to them, and two, to make it a habit. Make your money and managing your money a habit. Why all of that? Why do I talk about all of these things? Is because I'm trying to get people in a different mindset, mind frame when it comes to money and money management and what money can do for you. It's just a tool. So if you joined, thank you, Anthony, for sharing this on Twitter. If you joined yesterday, and inviting your followers, if you joined yesterday, I talked about this idea of figuring out what is your basic income requirement. And it's a challenge for people to really put their, hi Cindy, to put their arms around their minimum requirement of spending. Because I talked about two things that generally happen. Good morning. One is people will take their income and figure out how to spend it. So they allocate what they earn into the categories of spending. And number two, people look at their expenses and they earn just enough money to cover them, right? And so that either way, what you're not doing is creating a buffer. So I'm asking people to look at money and their spending requirements in a little bit different way. And so basic income really comes down to what would be the amount of money annually, right? This is the concept. What is the amount of money annually that you would need to sustain? It's a number, it's an equation, it's a different set of variables. Now they're not different expenditures, it's different variables. How to think about it. It said, okay, if someone sponsored you, right? Let's almost think about sponsorship. What would your sponsorship be in terms of requiring you to say, look, I have this money and it pays for all my basic expenses, and now I can do what I want to create to create purpose in life. And I think that we don't challenge ourselves enough when it comes to those numbers. So I want to go through a few categories, and I would ask for people to do this exercise for themselves and to say, here is the three columns that you see, and maybe I can make them a little bit bigger, but it's really like current, minimum, and maximum, right? Hi, Joyce. And so let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger because it's going to be a little bit easier to see. Okay. Here's what I'm talking about. Okay. So the categories that I have, hi, how are you? The categories that I have, and so I highlighted the area that I want you to focus on, is really, and by the way, do you see all my tabs? This is all my research I do on IRAs and stuff. Ask yourself how much you're spending on shelter, right? Like how much money is going to not just the mortgage payment or the rent payment, but all of the money that you're putting in when it comes to shelter. And so I actually am using some of my own numbers, kind of estimates. And you may say, well, it's really hard for me to estimate. If you're completely out of touch with the financial flow of your, sort of the cadence of your money, then I know that's going to be really, really hard for you to do. That's why you have to get in the habit of really getting a sense of where your money's going. So do look at your shelter requirements today. And again, the exercise would be to see, what are you spending today? What's the minimum that you think you need? And what's kind of the maximum? Which is interesting. Most people do not look at sort of the maximum they would spend. There's the sense of you should buy the most that you can afford, right? You should buy a biggest house, you should buy the biggest car, can I afford the monthly payment? And again, that kind of thinking is going to set you back. It's going to make you not able to have the perspective of free up money for your savings. So ask yourself how much you're spending on shelter, and that's not just your mortgage payment. That's right. I know, but you know what? The industry, the financial industry and the financial complex, which includes the real estate business, the education complex, the car buying complex, like all of the industries that sell you big purchases, push that idea. They said, what can you afford? And you said, no. What do I need, right? Like you should ask yourself, what is going to be enough? So I do like shelter. So add all your gas bills, utilities, really think about what it is that you're spending to house yourself and your family, right? That's going to be different depending on what you have. And ask yourself, what do you think would be the minimum that would be required? And by the way, you need to start releasing yourself from your current conditions to kind of imagine in 5 years, if you could put everything in play, what would it be? Sometimes people get really caught up in their current situation and they can't see past it. So just kind of use your imagination and say, okay, here's what I want to be paying. Here's what I think would be adequate. I think of $1,200 as adequate for housing. Now, it might not be in my city. I wouldn't be in Lincoln Park in Chicago because I don't think there's anything available for that money. But, if I said, look, if I were willing to move somewhere and just live somewhere, this is monthly. Yeah. And I did annual. So this is important. I always do monthly. Yeah. I always start with a monthly. So all your estimates, all your budgeting, really look at the monthly cadence, because so many things change within day to day or week to week, but we are on a monthly cadence. That's kind of our system. So yeah, I did a monthly one. Next one was nourishment, right? So shelter was one, and that's kind of what my current estimate, and it's probably under, yeah. And then nourishment is going to be all, not just groceries, but eating out, anything that you need to put in your and your family's food, right? So nourishment, I mostly call food, but also if you have nutrition supplements or anything like that, just add it all up. Family, I actually for me right now, family is like family care, and that's the money I spend for my kids' childcare, and it's actually low now, lower than it used to be. Health, again, healthcare, if you have employer-sponsored insurance, and for a family, it's probably $1,500. So again, start investigating these things of what they cost or what benefit you get. Purpose, I have purpose instead of employment. I'm a big believer that, it's funny, I was talking to a bit about it. I think that you should all aim to have 30% savings rate. So you should spend less than 70. And again, it depends on your income. This is why we kind of work one way and the other. This is kind of building it up to say, what do I need to live comfortably? And because it's really trying to get you to see if you're overspending in one place. But I think less than 70% of your income should be spent on all these things, because I'm a big believer in the 30% savings rate. And I know I'm in the minority, but I know mathematically, I know I'm mathematically right. Connection, engagement, education, experiences. And if you've been listening to my Maslow pyramid talks, this kind of lines up. It says from top to bottom, the things you need to take care of first: shelter, nourishment, and your family. You're welcome. Health is next, right? And again, most people don't think about the cost of health, but if you don't have an employer-sponsored insurance, you're going to have to pay for health. This is sort of the current market rates. Purpose, again, having a vocation or job, or again, I advocate for finding your purpose and participating in an economy, not just through employment, but through small business ownership. Connection, it's how do you connect with people, engagement, education, and experiences. So one of the things, I wrote these things in the bottom, is that you need to start differentiating between what you're spending what you would need to spend on these categories and how much premium you're paying. This might be actually a different spreadsheet I make. How much premium are you paying for status, peer pressure or other type of pressure, family pressure? How much employment actually costs you? Like, do you have to have a car to drive to work? That's an employment cost. And then that you're not feeling enough. Anyway, the exercise, these are the monthly current minimum max, and I just multiplied it by 12. And so, so I put some percentages here. And again, those are just my percentages. I would love to lower them. I think like third of the basic income for shelter is quite high. But I think that's actually typical, right? It's typical for people to spend 30 to 40% of their income or on shelter. And then nourishment, and there's other things that, again, it'll be different depending on your circumstance. But here's the point. Here's what I'm trying to get you guys to. Annually, right, this is kind of the basic income requirement at current spending levels. I think I could get to 50, right? That's half. Like, I think I could get, that is typical, right? 30%. I would love to get to half, right? Here's the point. But here's the maximum. Like, so somewhere between 50 being the minimum requirement, 110 being my typical right now, and like maybe spending 200. Here is why. Okay. If your basic income requirement is $100,000, your money invested, you need to have $1.25 million invested to generate this with 8% return. And again, I know people are like, oh my God, $1.25 million, that's so much money. That is not outside of the realm of imagination for you to accumulate in about a decade. And you can say, okay, if my basic income requirement is $100,000, which was kind of average, then you would need to build a $1.25 million asset for you to generate it. That means you'd never have to worry about paying for your basic stuff. Again, this number seems really, really large because people are not accustomed to thinking about capital assets in this manner. Now, if you said you could live on $50,000, that lowers that requirement to $625,000. Again, the sooner you can get to this base, this capital asset base, the sooner you can generate a basic income. Because basic income basically doesn't touch your capital. It throws off money here. And all it is self-insurance. Ultimately, all you're trying to create is self-insurance requirement. So if you're self-insured, it means you are not dependent on the circumstances of life. Right? Like, I use 8% because, guys, I'm realistic and I'm conservative. By the way, did you know that in the 70s, like, money market accounts were like double-digit return rates? So you had a safe way of creating this kind of cash flow. This is why I'm saying 20, 30 years ago, circumstances were different. I'm trying to address sort of our current situation, and this is the best I know how to do with the market returns. This can change, and this, by the way, is different in other countries. But in the U.S., this is a pretty good expected rate of return, and it's conservative. Because if you had a good year, you actually need this one calculates your capital asset base. But I like using 8%. But this is my point, is like, if you can lower your basic income requirement, it's not to say you can't have luxuries in life, but if your basic expenses, monthly expenses, are ballooning, means you are not allowing for any give in your life. Again, $100,000 basic income requirement, that's $1.25 million in capital asset base. And it only sounds large because you're thinking of spending all this money on things that you could buy. You need to start looking at it as a way to generate an investment return so that you can live a life that's a little bit more free. Again, this one's 110, so I can be more precise and I can say, okay, in my current, this is the whole point of this is what's the definition of being financially free. If so $110,000, you need to have a capital base of $1.375 million. That will cover, and I know there's like taxation and all, but I'm just saying cash flow wise, that's what you need. And that's what's a good start, because you need to know the ballpark, right? And this is kind of where your money's going in an annual basis for covering your basic needs. Now, you can take a $10,000 vacation. That's not your basic need, right? Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I think that's one of the things that people sometimes lose the nuance. It's not to say that's all you can ever spend or you can't have nice things in life. It's to say you will not experience financial difficulties because of your basic needs, right? This is about the cadence of life. When you're going up and down in your life, and if you have a lower cost basis for your basic needs, then you're able to withstand more shocks to your life. And most people are living at such a spending at such a rate that they don't really have any buffer, right? This is why I advocate for a 30% savings rate. Why? Because there might be a time in your life, there were several years in my life that I had 0% savings rate, right? 2 or 3 years. Because that's going to average it out to maybe 15 or 20, right? But if you come into the perspective that I'm just trying to save 5%, that 5% is not going to be adequate over your lifetime. That's why I advocate for 30% savings rate. So do your basic income exercise where you actually figure out, one, where your money is being spent on your necessities, right? Like separate them on your necessities. But look at the Maslow pyramid. That's why these are categories, right? This is what I find are things that are necessary in our modern life. But start at the top, right? Make sure you cover shelter, nourishment, family, health first, then purpose, then connection, then engagement, then education, then experiences. Like these are, hi, how are you? So figure out where you are, figure out what your monthly rate is. This is the monthly rate, and then multiply it by 12 to do that. And then ask yourself, what can I do with? Like, where could I go? Because you can't go down to zero on some of these things, right? That's not realistic. You can't just cut out shelter. You can't, unless you move in with your parents temporarily or something, but there's still a cost to it, right? You can't cut out all these things. So ask yourself, what's the minimum I could live with? Because then you always see that there's a huge difference, right? That's half, by the way, that's half. All challenge ourselves to live with less. All I'm trying to do is help people, give people the tools to figure out how they can create the better buffer and how they can get to a 30% rate. So that's the exercise that I did today. And I encourage you to do the same. That's why I wanted to illustrate sort of how I started thinking about it and the numbers that I'm looking at, to basically, at the end of the day, to get enough conviction that you too can do that you too can have a higher savings rate. That when you're looking at your finances and you're going, I just don't even know where to start, because part of it is you just accepted where you are today. It is a reality. Sometimes we've signed up for things that we're like, oh crap, like I wish I wouldn't have, which is okay. You got a decade plan, right? Like we're looking at a decade. If a decade from now you're having the same conversation with yourself, then just didn't, we didn't make any movement. The idea is for you to, over time, change your perspective on your basic income requirements and then free up some of that money to save. And if you're like, hey, I'm absolutely bottomed out in terms of this is the money I have to spend, then the only lever you have is income. You have to get more income. And again, it's not an overnight thing. It's a 5 to 10 year, right? Like what can you do in a year or 2 years? Everything's a long-term play in terms of this. So yeah, if you're kind of like, this is what it is in terms of my spending, I'm like, fine, then all you need to do is focus on income increase. But when you do increase that income, the first thing you don't do is upgrade, right? Is don't add to those categories. Hold your basic income. Yeah, well, and Joy, you have a very, I think you have a very good example of someone who's really sort of figured out their basic income requirement and or basic spending requirement, and that's why with you we're talking about income, right? Saying, okay, you've got a long life ahead of you, you've got a lot of potential, and you can actually leverage that. You leverage your experience and your passion and your purpose into income generation, and that'll come over time. But the goal would be to then take that excess, take that buffer, and then start investing it. So that's it. I hope you guys have, if you have any questions around it, if you're struggling with really analyzing it, and some of it is, the reason I can kind of pull those numbers really quickly is because I've been looking at my spending over the last 5-6 years. So don't think that this is like something I can do, after a week or two of watching my money, right? Like I've been really in the habit of it in a very structured way where I've been thinking about it. And invest, right? And again, because what part of what you're trying to solve for is shorter time period, right? So when when you're younger, so if you're in your 20s and 30s, this is like super critical to do because you have so much time and just to even do it smaller. And when you're a little bit further, sometimes you're like, I got to be more ambitious. I love it, right? 50%. And 50% is really, probably the right number for you. So that's the, and save and invest, right? Save and invest. And by the way, has anybody looked at the market? It's back over 18,000. Like we're back on this like crazy, for the Dow. The market's really up. So, and again, people look be like, oh, too late for me. It's never too late. Like a market's going to be up and down. We need to continue to believe in the fundamentals and take the long-term view when it comes to your, then comes to your spending requirements, but also when it comes to your investing horizon. So, yeah, right. You have, your children, your grandchildren, especially anyone with any interest in it, like, get them to see it because it's hard to see it immediately, but in 2 to 5 years, people will start recognizing it. That's why they need to look at the whole picture. That's why the net worth picture and total assets is such an important, metric for people to understand for their own self. So thanks a lot, guys. Thank you for your attention. Everybody who always participates and supports. I am actually on this journey in some parts on the journey of discovery when it comes to finances and what can money do for you with you. But I'm able to, you're welcome. I'm able to accelerate. And I have your questions about the blogs. I remember seeing a blog. I'll send you a link to a blog, Joyce, that somebody else shared with me. And then we can talk more about how to get into it. But you're welcome. Do the exercise. And again, start thinking about money a little bit differently. And I think that'll empower you to see a brighter future when it comes to finances. Read an article today in The Atlantic. Number one stressors in people's life is money. And let's try to reduce it. It's really unnecessary. So thanks a lot. I will be on tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central Time, every single day for Money Habits. This week's East Coast edition. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.